Yeah, there we go. Hi everyone, welcome to India HR Live, where change agents transform the world of HR. And today we are so excited to kick off the show. We have wonderful guests joining us from India. Esther Martinez, she's not available with us today at this point, but she might call in anytime. So stay tuned. And we have Guillaume Gevrey. I've learned it in a hard way. I've practiced it a lot, his full name, and he helped me also to practice his name, how to pronounce his full name. So I'm
Don't
pretty
worry,
much, so I'm pretty much excited, and we are so honored to have such an amazing guest with us today. And it's August 15th tomorrow. I hope you all will be celebrating our Independence Day tomorrow. So my very best wishes and prayers to all of you in India. And yeah, we have opened an India HR Live Google page so that it will be easy for every one of our guests or of our learners to join the Hangout anytime. So just made that clear. So please follow the Google page, India HR Live. I just tweeted it out yesterday. So anyway, so let's go to our session. Without further ado, let me introduce our honored guest, Guillaume Gevrey. Did I get it correctly?
Yeah, that's fine. Just call me Guillaume instead. That's fine.
Okay, great. Director and Principal Consultant at C2C Consulting and Training Private Limited. Guillaume, welcome to the show. Can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Nisha. There again, I'm very honored to be with you. I know Esther was very much looking forward to this, and I'm sure she'll be joining us soon. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But that's it. I'm very honored and very excited to be a part of your show, Nisha. I've been following you for the last few weeks, and especially following them such a trail of guests. And I'm very honored to be there. Very honored to be there.
Well, thank you so much. And to our audience, I just want to make this point clear. There are a lot of works going on behind the scene. Like from our guest itself, they've been doing a tremendous effort yesterday onwards to get this technology settings and sound settings work properly. And we have tried almost 6 or 7 times, I guess so. And then luckily we got everything perfect. And from Esther, I think she's finding a little trouble in terms of it's raining, heavily raining out there. So she's finding a little trouble, but she might call in anytime. So let's talk about the subject matter, diversity at workplace. So most often, when we hear the word diversity, most often people consider it's just gender or ethnicity or age. But I guess it's a much broader perspective. And when it comes to employees, employees at the organization, well, it's actually something different to almost everyone in the organization, and they don't get it. What does it really mean, diversity at a workplace? So can you take us a little bit about what does it really mean?
Sure. Well, thanks, Nishan. So I agree with you that a lot of people, when we talk about diversity, first think about gender, age, eventually nationality, ethnicity, and let's say national culture. These are, I guess, are the obvious ones. What a lot of people have a tendency to forget, as you said, is that diversity really encompasses any dimension that makes you, me, and anyone else different. Which means that on paper, every single one of us is different. And diversity, as we know it, diversity with a big D, is the representation of all these differences. So I'm not saying that no one thinks about that. It's really not the case. But there is a tendency to have a focus more on these more visible aspects of diversity rather than on what we might call secondary dimensions or less visible dimensions of diversity, like thinking styles, like educational background, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and working preferences, and so on. Okay, which might not be as visible, but are as important, if not more, because they're not as obvious to spot.
Yeah, Yes, yeah, that's interesting. And most often, let's just say, if you're working in a collaborative, cross-cultural collaborative environment, people have to know the other team members, where are they coming from, what are their background, especially the skills and competencies. So when we talk about to have a, what would I say, to have a common language, when we talk about diversity, the employer is missing the mark to educate the employees on how to have a proper or a proper conduct at this workplace that is suitable to the values of the organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it doesn't need to be enforced in a way. So I know a lot of companies sometimes do this as a compulsory effort to try and create a certain inclusion in sometimes let's say superficial ways. But the thing is, I think it's a great way to start, and it's a good way to start changing the mindset as well. I think there's no effort that is not laudable. Even though there might be some effort that might take a bit more time and a bit more subtlety to sometimes really impact organizational culture. Yeah. So, but I've seen a lot of companies, especially in India, in the last 5 years, really spend a lot of time in thinking a lot and really doing a lot of focus group with different employee representation group that they have to really try and understand what they can do differently. And I think that is very commendable from corporate India in general. This real desire to try and overcome just the stereotype of gender, age, and a national culture aspect of diversity, and really try and go deeper.
Great, that's an interesting, yeah, that's an interesting insight to have a focus group and bring that kind of connection between the employees to let them know each other. So that's why they can understand what's the difference between each one of them and how to manage that in a better fashion, right?
Absolutely. And the thing is, ideally, that's what we want them to do. Now, the thing is, because we're in a corporate environment, it's not always the easiest conversations to have, and we need to recognize that. People want to fit in. They're trying to look as to what are the similarities that exist between them in order to build rapport, especially at the beginning, to build trust in the relationship. People look for sameness, and that's natural. Okay, they look for comfort. Now, the thing is, what organizations need to do is to create an environment that supports or that gives the time to people to, let's say, explore what's below the waterline and explore the iceberg below the waterline. If I can use the allegory of the iceberg to try and discover what is not obvious in the differences between you and I, right? Because it's not by looking at that I can understand your thinking style, for example. This is something we might need to talk about. I don't know what's the impact of your education on who you are today. And the thing is, being able to have these discussions, which are not easy conversations to have when we're not used to them, is really what's going to help people know each other well and understand what are the aspects of diversity that are relevant in the relationship between you, Nisha, and myself. Yeah? If we can spend time in being able to go below the waterline, that's how we're going to get to know each other, on top of the obvious diversity aspects that you and I might visibly see between the two of us.
Yeah, that's totally true. I totally agree with you. And as a person, you are coming from a different background, from a different culture, totally different culture than India. But then you have been there for a past decade, and then you've been doing a successful job in your career. And I know you have worked in corporate Americas and corporate India, and then you had a lot of insights and experiences interacting with such a different, diverse culture, especially when you handle or when you deal with your manager. So can you talk a little bit about what have you found or what have you experienced in those initial time, and how can a manager be a better person in terms of understanding their team and making them comfortable in that work environment?
Absolutely. So I don't think I've faced much more challenges than others. I've just decided I had a very obvious adaptation to the Indian work culture, which took its time, and I've learned by falling, as many people do. And but that was, again, my choice and my decision. That's actually what brought me here, is to confront myself to another culture. That's something that I enjoy doing. Now, as for a successful manager in the workplace, I think to put things simply, what they need to do is to care. And I know it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people that are in management positions are not there because they care about the people they manage. They're there because they care about their career, which is legitimate. I'm not delegitimizing that at all. But the thing is, until you can also reach out and really care for the people you work with, it's going to be very hard to reach to them in a way that's going to make them feel comfortable to open up on certain aspects of who they are, and which in turn can make you understand as the manager how can you eventually adapt your style or adapt the environment in order to cater to these differences and get the most out of the diversity in your team. What I've seen today is that a lot of managers, because it's comfortable, once again, I'm not throwing a stone to anyone here, and I know for a very long time was doing the same thing. Managers look for similarities between them and others. It makes things simple. Let's find one way, one size fits all, because at the end of the day, that's what's convenient, that's what's easy, and that's what's fair to a lot of people's eyes. Okay, that's what's fair, and it takes time. People don't go. I think it's a developmental process. We all start with looking for sameness, but what happens afterwards is beyond sameness is tolerance, and then acceptance, and then adaptation, and that's where inclusion is in the adaptation part. Can I adapt myself to you in order to get the most out of? In order for you to get the most out of the environment I can create for you to be successful. That's my role as a leader. Yeah, is to enable you. Can I do that? Can I adapt? That's really the skill. And then again, it's a developmental process. It's not something that happens overnight. Okay. I think organizations have realized that. There's more and more people. Organizations are looking more and more at coaching around initiatives like this, rather than just simple classroom training, which can be a good way for people to start thinking about it. But for individuals after that to take their thinking beyond as to what do I do as a manager in company XYZ in order for my team to enable my people. Okay, a lot of people are looking at long-term coaching engagements in order to support their managers. That we see that more and more.
Right. So in order to have an established, what would I say, diversity training, very deliberately, how to have this diversity training in an organization. So if it is a company that's going to start this initiative in a first, initially, if they wanted to do this kind of an initiative and they want to launch this and introduce this particular vision to their employees, where do they start?
Well, I think it all starts in the messaging. Okay, what are you telling your people when you do that? Are you telling them you're not inclusive and I need to teach you? Very often that's going to raise more resistance than anything else. Or you need to learn, I don't. There again, it's not something that's going to be helpful. In my experience, what makes these programs successful is first, when you first hear them talk about it, I hear my clients talk about this, the first thing I ask them to do is, have you done your focus groups? Have you looked at the different demographics in your population, the different employee representation groups? Have you had focus groups as to, are there really inclusion issues in your organization? Do people feel excluded? Have you looked at your exit interviews? What do they tell you? And so on and so forth. Based on that, then do we establish a need as to what aspects of diversity inclusion do you need to work on in order to be successful? I was working, for example, recently with a company that, as far as representation of women, is on par, if not higher percentage than anywhere I've seen. They still wanted to discuss diversity inclusion because they realized that it was not only about gender. They had done good work around gender, but they also realized that, especially around thinking styles and working habits, okay, and people and incorporating people in the work culture, because they do a lot of lateral hires, that was also a very important aspect of diversity that they wanted to focus on. Okay, so what we've done afterwards was really defined by what came out of the focus group, what the employees were saying, and the observations of the CXO team as to what can be done better for the inclusion of different demographics in their workforce. Okay, so that's really what we're starting to see, and I think that's, after that, it's a question of having the discussion. I think the purpose of diversity and inclusion training is to get the conversation going. You're not going to teach someone to be adaptable in a day and half a day, in a few hours, not even in a week. Yeah, you can put them in a situation where they see what it feels like to be an outsider, to get them to think, what can we do differently? But the nexus is really to start the conversation. Okay, for people to take stock, stop, think about this, and start looking inside as to what their own personal biases might be and how does that impact their relationship and their success in general at work or in society as a whole. And that's why I think, especially for certain people in organizations, that coaching is a very good follow-up to enable them to keep on having this conversation with a coach that they can use as a sounding board. Okay, in order to develop their own action plans over a certain term, in order to be more successful, okay, and be more inclusive.
Yeah, that's true. Unless an employee go through that kind of an environment or situation, they may not be able to understand what they are dealing with or what they are going through, right? So I totally agree with that. I second that. And everybody, we are halfway through our show, and if you have any questions to our guest, please tweet it with the hashtag IndiaHRLive. Talking about this, managing diversity at work, what do you think? Where do employers get wrong in terms of managing it perfectly? Let's just say I have a simple example. Going back to
generalize, it's hard to do. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have an example at my hand talking about the competencies very particularly. I have seen employers. A few of the employers, they constantly hire from one particular university, and they totally ignore any other universities or schools, even though they have a great experience, or even though they get an excellent candidate from a particular university. I totally agree with that. But still, do you think that is kind of a little that may create a lack of diversity when you focus on one particular university and focus on one particular competencies? Do you think so?
Well, again, I don't think there's an absolute yes or no answer to that. I know that to me it would look like, I would agree with you that it looks, well, aren't they all going to be formatted the same way? Now the thing is, we have to put ourselves back into the shoes of HR. HR's role is really difficult in treading the line between creating a diverse and inclusive workforce and also looking at things like culture fit, people that are going to be hitting the ground relatively quickly, and so on. The thing is, because they have to tread between these two things, it becomes very difficult sometimes, right? You know that you're a law school, you're going to hire only from Harvard in the US. Yeah, you know you're only going to get good people. You know you're safe. You know that people that are going to quickly understand your organizational culture because everyone's going to be formatted the same way. After that, I agree. It could lead to, well, foregoing talent that could be not from Harvard and that could be excellent. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with the IIMs and the IITs here. People coming out of IIM and IIT have a huge tailwind. Because they come from that institution, they get first pick in a lot of things. Now, I have nothing against IMs and ITs. I'm very admirative of people, of these students. But having the tag doesn't automatically make you good. And we heard something similar very recently with an institution that I won't name, but that you see in your newspaper every day with someone with a famous ponytail, that because of him and his bad reputation, a lot of people are not willing to hire people coming out of his schools. And his schools might not be the best, but some of the people coming out of his schools are extremely smart. So if people don't give him a chance because they come with the wrong tag, it's a loss for everybody. It's a loss for the student, but it's a loss for the organization.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's the same thing for the promotion policy. If in the promotion policy, if the IMers get it before the other ones, well, the other ones are going to leave, and what's going to be the impact of that on retention, on attrition, on morale, and on the reputation of your organization in the long run? Because people today will take to Twitter, they will go on Glassdoor and say what has happened to them, right? Totally. And the impact that could have afterward can be much larger. So it's, again, I understand. I've been in HR in the corporate world for too long to know how hard this line is to walk. Culture fit very often seems like people coming out from a similar format is going to help me. I find that dangerous. I can understand why some people do it, at least when they define culture fit that way. And the thing is, with a very diverse workforce, then inclusion becomes a real challenge, and HR has also other responsibilities to deal with. Okay, so they might want to be diverse, they might not always have the time to create the inclusion, and sometimes it might just be comfortable to look for similarity.
Mm-hmm. Well, oftentimes we talk about hire for the culture fit, or recruit for diversity. So it's kind of a fact that our audience is asking. Abhinav Kamara is asking, can recruiting, while keeping in mind the diversity factor, at times lead to trade-off between talent and diversity? And that brings me to the obvious question: talent or diversity, which comes first?
Both.
Excellent question.
I'm going to be very. No, it comes both. I'm someone who doesn't really think in either or, but with things and talent and diversity rather than talent or diversity. It can be found in both. The thing is, talent is talent. Whether you think like me, Nisha, or you think differently from me, or you look like me, or you're a different gender, or sexual orientation, or thinking style, or education, whatever it is, if you're good, you're good. It's my responsibility. If we want to work together, and I'm responsible for you in my organization, it's my responsibility to create the environment for you to be able to be successful. That is what's going to create. That's what's going to unleash your potential. I'm someone who believes that talent lies in everyone. It's a question of creating the conditions for the success of that person to happen.
Great.
Yeah? And that means however diverse or similar we are is irrelevant. And on top of that, I don't believe that there can be two identical people on this planet. Each one of us is diverse in its own way. So even my twin brother, if I had one, I would have to think about how can I engage him differently than me, because he is not me.
Yeah,
see what I mean?
True. Yeah.
So for me, it's talent and diversity. Okay, and I just find diversity fun. It's just fun to have people with different ages, different genders, different origins. Let's look at the world differently, have different worldviews, challenge each other sometimes. Yes, it can lead to conflict, but again, we learn from each other.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing thing. Yeah.
That's how we grow as well. That's how we get better, and that's how we develop our own talent and the talent of others.
Yeah, it's
through
actually
that confrontation of differences.
I totally agree with you, because I'm here right now in US. Every day I'm dealing with a different people and different culture. So I can see I'm learning new things every day. So it's kind of rejuvenating for me to get up and talk to people and hang around. So we have another question from Anish Aravind. He's asking, what aspects besides laws required to foster real gender diversity?
I see. It's the $100 million question. Are laws going to make the difference or no? A lot of states have made that decision, right? A lot of governments have made the decision, whether in the states where you are in the show or even here in India, right? There's all these debates about quotas in order to enable a community or not. It's a beginning. The thing is, there again, let's not throw away the baby with the bathwater. It's there again, the intention is good, and I think that's what's key to keep in mind, is that assume positive intention. I think people are trying. It doesn't mean it's always working. And I think the quota system is one way of trying. It'll have some successes, but the thing is, it also creates barriers for others. The thing is, if we want to create artificial tailwinds to certain categories of population, then we're creating automatically artificial headwinds for the others, whichever way that works. The thing is, it's all, once again, it's easy to say, it might sound like a platitude, but it's all in your head. At the end of the day, it has to come from each individual. And the thing is, when your population, your workforce, has reached that kind of tipping point where enough people start thinking that way, but also not only being tolerant, but also accepting the difference and valuing them, that means creating value out of them. Once people see that it works, when people see the success of others around them, and how much more successful they are, the people around them are as well, I think that's how you're going to change mindset. It's going to take time. One-day training is not going to do it. It's going to start the conversation. But at the end of the day, especially if we want to change behaviors, I do still think that examples from the top are going to be very important. I do think that it's the leadership's role to role model the behaviors that they need for the organization to be successful. Okay, because it's very easy for a CEO to say, okay, I want a diverse a diversity and inclusion policy with a chief diversity officer and all this. But no, I want my secretary to speak the same language I do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. The thing is, we still see that very often. Until it's role modeled, it's going to be hard for people below to believe that, or at least to make it a priority.
Right. Great insights.
Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. That I totally second that. And next one is from Raghunandan. He's asking, what is your thought on cross-cultural workshops in building the gap on diversity in the organization? I think we talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, so be careful, Raghunandan. You're actually treading in very dangerous waters. This is really my topic of specialization is cross-cultural competence. So I could get going and I could speak until tomorrow, and I know that we're limited for time. I think that, again, a lot of organizations have now understood that it's critical, especially here in India, where most large organizations work in a global environment. I remember 10 years ago, people telling me, oh, intercultural training, honestly, we're all human. And my answer to that is, yes, absolutely, but that's all we have in common. Everything else is different. It's time to talk about it and the impact it has. It took time, and I do think there's a big difference. Now, we've seen a difference in the curriculum between what existed 10 years ago in the IT and BPO industry, which was basically how much is a hamburger going to cost you in New York, or who's the third person in line to the throne of England, which was absolutely irrelevant, maybe interesting information, but irrelevant to the job at hand, to real cross-cultural awareness programs today, where we talk about, so most of them use a dimension format where we're going to talk about a certain cultural dimension. Are you a direct communicator, indirect communicator, individualistic, group-oriented, so on and so forth. But again, it allows to start the conversation going. Okay? Give me 2 days and I can even do skill building. But the thing is, it all depends on what you want to do, right? I think they can only help because it gets the conversation going. It allows people to start thinking that, okay, let's assume positive intention in my culturally different partner, wherever they're from, they're Chinese, they're French, they're Danish, they're Indian, they're American. Assume positive and suspend judgment, assume positive intention. What did he need from his side? Yeah? What could that mean for him, this behavior? Now that I'm sorry, now that I understand this, then I'll decide to react in one way or the other. The thing is, for me, that's what cross-cultural training should be about, is to learn this. Stop. Don't rush to conclusion because the behavior you saw you don't understand, or you could understand it wrong. Stop. People have good intentions usually. Assume that. Think, where could that come from, and what are you going to do with it? I think that's what cross-cultural training should be about. After that, the rest you find in the Lonely Planet, and the rest you learn by interacting with people. There again, it's a developmental process. Cross-cultural competence is a developmental process. It goes through minimization or looking for sameness. It ends. It will end, hopefully, in adaptation. If that's where you want to be, there again, there's some people who don't want to adapt because they don't need to. The remote farmer in Andhra Pradesh, or in Telangana today, I'm sorry, who works in his farm, who goes to the local village, and that's it. He doesn't need to know about American culture. He doesn't care. It doesn't have an impact on him. He doesn't need to be adaptable to that culture. But if for you or me, it's important, then it's a development process we need to go through. And I think training is an important part of that process because it allows you to give you keys on how to read certain situation. It takes time to debrief certain experiences you have so you can eventually learn from your mistake and create your own best practices. So in a nutshell, there again, I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore your auditors.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. Oh, not at all. This is an amazing conversation, fantastic conversation. We are actually
I wish Esther had been there to give her opinion about that. I would have been very keen to hear her.
Me too. Yeah. Well, we will schedule a show with her again sometime soon. We'll take one more question. Yeah, we'll take one more question as a last question. Do line managers really see value in diversity? Or is it only HR's goal? So how can line managers be convinced? It's from Gevrey.
Some do, some don't. And again, like everything, it's just there's no black and white. There's no saying that this population doesn't. The thing is, very often for line managers, the priority for them is result. That's what they're made responsible for, is execution. Thinking about diversity is something, in my experience, most of them are very happy to. But because they're so pressed for time, they very little have the time to actually think about what can they do differently, create different processes or new policies or behave differently, because they're caught in the action constantly. So it's not, I don't think it's a lack of willingness. I don't think it's a lack of interest. I think it's a lack of time. I think after that, usually the senior most layers of the organization are very much aware of the business impact. What line managers might not be aware, just like that in the heat of the operation time, is the business impact. But that's a very simple discussion to have. Yeah, that in 10 minutes it's very clear, very easy to make people understand the business impact of a non-inclusive work culture, especially a diverse one that's non-inclusive. It's very easy to do, and the thing is, everyone realizes it, everyone agrees, and I think everyone wants to get better at this. But it's a question of priorities. Yeah, and in my experience, there's not many managers' scorecards that actually have a diversity and inclusion line on it. Yeah, and the thing is, for a lot of them, if that's not there, they're not going to think about it. It might not be a right reason, but the thing is, at the end of the day, there again, we need to be realistic and put ourselves in the shoes of the people in operations.
Well, Guillaume, it's been such a fantastic conversation, and I'm so honored to have you here. I know it's late night in India, and you've taken you've actually taken this time from your personal life. So it's been such an amazing show. And we will definitely.
It's the weekend, so it's okay. It's the weekend already. It's Wednesday tomorrow, so it's fine.
Sure. So, yeah, thank you so much, and from our audience, I thank you on behalf of them. Great.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Very honored once again. Thank you. You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much. So, to our audience. Bye-bye. Stay tuned to IndiaHRLive.com to get all the updates about next week, and who are gonna come and who are gonna discuss about what we have planned for you guys. And thank you so much for all the tweets and all the social media shares. Love it, and without your support, we wouldn't be able to do this amazing job. And we will definitely schedule a show with Esther sometime soon, so stay tuned for that too. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.